This video was brought to you by me. Okay, so I kinda need to just put my thoughts out there on this, but a thought has actually occurred to me in regards to the reveal of the PlayStation 5 Pro. It's a thought that I really did not want to even consider, talking about, but I can't help but wonder how Sony is going to recover from this. Because they are honestly on the verge of shooting themselves in the foot to the point of losing all of their support. They've practically already lost a lot of support as is with a lot of things that recently happened. I'm not going to go into all that right this moment. But case in point, things are just not looking good for Sony right now. Honestly, the PlayStation 5 generation as a whole has been kind of a mixed bag. Like, we got some really, really good games on it, but there is a lot of stuff we did get that we either did not ask for, or we either got very little of what we were wanting. Like, when it comes to first-party titles, we are really lacking with the PlayStation 5. Because, let's be real, PlayStation 5, while it is a good console, it's not receiving the good support that I feel like Sony could be giving it. Instead, they are either releasing games we don't really care about, third parties are doing a lot of the releasing as far as games go, or they are still supporting the PlayStation 4 with certain games, but not giving them PlayStation 5 versions and only really relying on the backwards compatibility for them to run on the PlayStation 5, which is a poor way to market your console, but that is unfortunately the state Sony is in right now with this. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a bad thing that PlayStation 4 is still being supported. Not every person can actually get a PlayStation 5 even still. And I don't necessarily think it's only on Sony for PlayStation 4 to still be receiving games, but not PlayStation 5. It honestly boils down to the developers and, of course, the studios making those games. And that's all well and good. I have nothing against that. But my personal problem is the way Sony is handling things right now, how they are marketing the PlayStation 5, and some of the very poor practices and decisions that they have been making lately. Let's look at the total disaster that was Concord. This game was in development for, I want to say, about 8 years or so. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But this game was in development for years. And I mean years. And the budget for this game was $250 million. Let's let that sink in for a moment. I know other YouTubers have covered this, but I want to go ahead and give my 2 cents here in this video. This was a $250 million disaster, and Sony tried to release it even though games like this are either free to play in this current day and age, or the market for them just is not there. And it's not even just the stuff with Concord either. It's also the fact that they are raising the prices on stuff. For one, the PlayStation 5 had a price increase already. For another, PlayStation Plus had a price increase already. And just recently, the PlayStation 5's DualSense controller got a $5 price increase to go along with all of that. Which I know $5 is not a lot, but you have to factor in that the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller on its own was a $70 accessory. So you're literally turning that into a $75 accessory. And heck, depending on colors and like certain additions of that controller, it may end up being more than that. Like, I've seen these controllers as high as almost $90, which now they would probably be almost $95, which is outrageous for a freaking controller. And as the cherry on top, we have the PS5 Pro being revealed with a release date and a price of $700. Let's let that sink in for just a moment. A $700 PlayStation 5. It plays all of the same games that the current PlayStation 5 can play, just at higher frame rates and higher resolution, but it's a $700 system, which on its own is already a very steep price. Because, let's be real, the PlayStation 5 retailed at $400 for the digital model and $500 for the disc model. The PlayStation 5 Slim retailed for the exact same price as the standard PlayStation 5, and that caused the standard PlayStation 5 to be fizzled out and replaced by the Slim. Much to my surprise, the Pro is not replacing the Slim, which would not make much sense considering that the Slim has not been out that long. But then again, the PlayStation 5 standard being replaced, at least as far as I'm aware, someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but as far as I'm aware, that was a first for Sony when it came to a console revision, because mid-generation refreshes happen often, but I don't recall them ever replacing previous models. As far as I'm aware, when the PlayStation 4 Slim came out, it did not replace the PlayStation 4 Standard whenever it retailed, and it was the same for the PlayStation 4 Pro. Personally, I didn't even upgrade from my standard PlayStation 4. I have the Star Wars edition of the PlayStation 4, and I'm perfectly happy with that. So, I just never really saw the need to get a Pro system or a Slim model. And it's going to be the same exact case with the PlayStation 5, especially given how Sony has been lately with pretty much all of their business practices. So with PlayStation 5, we have a lack of first-party games coming out. We have a very overpriced Pro model. We have a $250 million disaster that flopped. And as the cherry on top, Sony is dead set on doing exactly what they want and marching to the beat of their own drum with all of this, and not even thinking about considering listening to the fans that have built them up to where they are at right now. And I'm not gonna lie, it's very frustrating because I've been with PlayStation since the very original PlayStation. I literally had a PlayStation 1, a PlayStation 2. I actually still have my PlayStation 2. I got a PlayStation 3, a PlayStation 4, and a PlayStation 5. I even have a PlayStation Vita TV, and a PSP. So I pretty much have all of Sony's stuff. I even have the PlayStation 1 Classic Mini, if that tells you anything. It just frustrates me to see Sony in this state, because they have gotten to where they are so consumed by their own greed, and they are so one-track minded, that they are making poor business decisions that their consumers are just not happy with, but they don't seem to really care about the fan feedback or what their consumers really want. As a matter of fact, they're so out of touch that they are not willing to even look or consider, hey, maybe the fans are going to be happy with this. Or maybe the games want this series to come back, or whatever. No, what they really want is a very expensive PS5 Pro. What they really want is Concord. That's literally what their mindset was, and it is coming back to bite them right in the rear end. And honestly, the fact that Concord flopped is a prime example of that. Literally, almost no one cared about Concord. And even though people were very, very heavily demonstrating that this is not what we want, Sony was dead set on releasing it, saying it was going to be a massive success. This was going to be a brilliant game that everyone's going to play. And almost no one played it. Can you let that sink in for just 1 second? Like, honestly, like, just think about that for a moment. Sony was dead set on that, and it failed. And as a result, not even a week after the game's release, they shut the game down. Now, it may come back as a free-to-play game, But one, taking a game that you charge $40 for and making it free to play, that right there is a death sentence to a game, and this game was already dead on arrival. So that's not going to save Concord if they do bring it back as a free to play. Because like I said, it was a dead on arrival game, so trying to make it get a free to play game, assuming that is what they're trying to do based on the message they put out, that right there is only going to piss off people who did spend $40 on this game. Because this is honestly a game that should have been free to play from the get-go, due to the fact that most games like this are already free to play at launch, just with in-game purchases or microtransactions. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I do support microtransactions in free-to-play games or anything. I'm just simply saying, a game like Concord is not going to appeal to somebody at a $40 price point when there's already games like that out there that are free to play that do the exact same thing, just again have in-game purchases. I'm not sure if Concord had in-game purchases because I didn't buy it. I wasn't interested. I did not play Concord, so I can't confirm that. But I am under the assumption that based on the type of game it is, that it either had microtransactions or it at least had DLC. I'm not 100% sure. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I honestly would not put it past Sony if they did put microtransactions in Concord, or at the very least, were planning on it at some point. And I guarantee you, if this game does come back as a free-to-play game, they will inevitably put microtransactions in it. I am willing to bet money on that. Because let's face it, that's just how greedy Sony has become. They want to make money on every possible level, and it doesn't matter if you like what they put out or not. They literally gave that message with Concord, despite the feedback, and look at the disaster that it became. It was Sony's biggest financial flop in history, and they are still wanting to try to bring it back in some way. So if free-to-play is the route they go, I guarantee you microtransactions is going to be something that they shove in there, just because I can see them being that greedy. And as a longtime fan of Sony, this is a major slap in the face. Like, the level of low that they have stooped in recent times with the PlayStation 5 is one of the biggest slaps to consumers I have ever seen. Even Nintendo has not gone that far, and that says a lot considering a lot of the crap that Nintendo has pulled over the years, but I'm not going to go into that in this video. I'm just simply using it as a bit of a comparison. Sony has stooped to a low that is beyond any other company I have seen in recent times. And it's honestly a shame to see Sony stoop this low, because back in the good old days, they used to care a lot more about what us consumers wanted. They were more interested in giving us games and franchises that we actually liked. They weren't worried about super, like, big releases like Concord, like putting, like, these stupid high budgets into these games only for them to, like, give us disastrous launches. They weren't worried about releasing consoles that were massively overpriced, aside from the PlayStation 3, which I know the PlayStation 3 did not exactly have a good launch, because, you know, it was overpriced when it came out, but the PlayStation 5 Pro is the first time it has been like that since the PS3, and even then, the PS3 did not launch for quite as much as the PS5 Pro. So, there is that, but case in point, disregarding that, they did used to care a whole lot more than what they do right now. And before anyone says anything, yes, I am well aware that it was a much different time back then, and business practices were not quite where they are today. I'm simply just saying, back then, that was the case, but I am also well aware that it was a different time, and of course, nothing around, like, the PS3's launch or anything was close to where it's at now, because back then, business practices were not quite as shady. Like, I am well aware it was a different time. I'm just simply saying that in comparison to years ago and now, it was very different. But the fact that it was a different time back then is still irrelevant to my point. And all of this is to say, what is the future of Sony? The PlayStation 5 Pro launched at $700. I know I said that before, but the PlayStation 5 Pro, $700. This is on top of the other issues that Sony has presently. Let's let that sink in. On top of the lack of first-party games that we have gotten, on top of the financial failure that was Concord that sunk them $250 million, on top of everything else I mentioned, this is a $700 system. If we even get to the next generation with Sony, how is this going to impact the PlayStation 6? If the PlayStation 6 even does happen. Because, let's be real, if Sony continues down the path that they are continuing down, I don't think the PlayStation 6 will happen. And the reason I'm saying this is because they already had one financial flop. And based on the price point of the PlayStation 5 Pro, I do not see this selling unless they, for some reason, decide to lower the price and stop being so dang greedy with a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, as sad as it is though, I don't see Sony doing that. Sony is so consumed by greed that they are just doing what they want and not really caring. They are giving consumers things that they did not want or ask for. Look at Concord again. Look at the PlayStation 5 Pro. Do we really need a PlayStation 5 Pro? Honestly, no. And I already said this in my initial reaction to the PlayStation 5 Pro, but I honestly could not notice that much of a difference with the PlayStation 5 Pro versus the PlayStation 5. And yes, I am taking into account that it could be the fact that it was a YouTube video that was being streamed. I am taking that into consideration. But my whole point with this is a lot of that stuff that is enhanced with the PlayStation 5 Pro, you have to either go out of your way to even notice it, or you just straight up won't notice it. Now, I will have to actually see it in person for me to really confirm that. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's definitive. But what I will say is this was not a needed upgrade right now. If they wanted to release a PS5 Pro, what they really should have done was maybe wait a couple more years and actually give us some more games for the PlayStation 5 that we have now, instead of releasing a PlayStation 5 Pro when all that it can really do is play a multitude of games that was already playable on the PlayStation 5. Which, by the way, most of those games are PlayStation 4 games, either through backwards compatibility or either PlayStation 4 games that got PlayStation 5 enhanced versions, or even PlayStation 5 remakes. Don't believe me with some of that? Well, let's take a look at some examples. The Last of Us Part 1 is going to be my first example of this. What exactly is The Last of Us Part 1? I know this thing is showing The Last of Us Part 2 here, but trust me, I am watching The Last of Us Part 1 trailer right here. This is literally a remake of a remaster on the PlayStation 4, but the game originated on PlayStation 3. I kid you not. The Last of Us originated on PlayStation 3. It got a remaster on PlayStation 4. The remake for PlayStation 5 is just a remake of that remaster. So, that right there is exhibit number 1. The next example that I will give is the Until Dawn remake. This is a game that released on the PlayStation 4. It is already playable on PlayStation 5 through backwards compatibility. And yet it is getting a remake for PlayStation 5. It didn't even get a PlayStation 5 upgrade with the PlayStation 4 version that we already had. It's just a remake of the game that is already available and playable on PlayStation 5 that released on PlayStation 4. Still not convinced? Well, let's look at another game. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, this is not a PS5 remake, but it is a game that released on the PlayStation 4. And it got a PlayStation 5 upgrade. Which, granted, I will say they did give a free upgrade to this, but the fact that this is a PlayStation 4 game that they re-released on PlayStation 5 just with enhanced graphics, that right there is still another way to prove my point, because it doesn't really negate anything. If anything, it just further proves my point. Not to mention, they pulled a stupid stunt with this to where it did get DLC, but the DLC was exclusive to the PS5 version, which was a massive slap in the face to people who owned it on PS4. If you did not have the PlayStation 5 or the PS5 version, you were simply screwed out of getting the DLC, which I think was completely stupid because this game originated on PS4. So, if you're going to do a cross-gen game, which technically this isn't really a cross-gen game because it came out, I want to say maybe a couple years before the PS5 was even revealed, but if you're going to do a game like this, make it accessible to everybody who owns it on whatever platform. So, that right there is my third example. It's a little bit of a caveat because it's not technically a remake of a PS4 game, but it still technically counts because the DLC is exclusive to the PS5 version, and it is a PS5 enhanced game that was on the PS4. But this isn't even my last example. I can keep going. Still not convinced? Still don't believe me? Well, how about we take another look at another game? Horizon Forbidden West. Now, this game is a little bit of a different case as well, because this is an actual cross-gen game, but it still proves my point for one simple reason. It technically still is a PS4 game. It came out to the PS4 and the PS5 about the same time, but it has the exact same problem as Final Fantasy VII Remake. Even though this released on the PS4 and PS5 at the same time, the DLC is exclusive to the PS5 version, which at that point, you may as well have not even made a PS4 version. On one hand, I get it, because people who did not have a PS5 wanted to play the new game. I am very well aware of that. But if you're going to make a cross-gen game, I know I said this earlier, but if you're going to make a cross-gen game, make all parts of that game accessible across your platforms, instead of pissing people off who can't get a PS5 and making the DLC exclusive to the next gen system. That right there makes no sense. But despite all of that, this still proves my point, because technically this is still a PS4 game, just enhanced for PS5 in a sense. I'm going to say in a sense because it did release on both at the same time, but I'm counting it in this case because of that. Oh, and you thought we were done? Oh no, I am not done yet. Let's take another look. Spider-Man Remastered. Now, I know Insomniac had everything to do with Spider-Man, but you gotta keep in mind, Sony does own the Spider-Man IP at present, so I'm still counting this. And not to mention, Spider-Man released on the PlayStation 4 before the PS5 came out, so this right here perfectly falls into my point. This is a game that was on the PlayStation 4 that did not need a remaster, mind you. And another thing, it was already available to play on the PS5 due to backwards compatibility, and the PlayStation 5 gave it performance enhancements as it was, but they still made a remaster of it for the PS5. Now, if that doesn't convince you, I honestly do not know what will. And technically, I'm not even really done yet, because Sony has done this with multiple games on the PS5. Even if they're not remakes, they are still enhanced versions of PS4 games on PS5. a lot of them will either be free upgrades, and some of them will also give you like a $10 fee to upgrade to the PS5 version, but they'll still technically fall in the category because of the fact that they are PS4 games, just enhanced for PS5. But the PS5 didn't even need those. Like, they were already playable on PS5 through backwards compatibility, and they already had performance enhancements on the PS5. So my thing is, what was the point? Did we honestly need that? I do not think so. And again, what is that going to say about the PlayStation 6? If Sony even survives long enough to get to that point, are they going to do the same thing with the PlayStation 6 that they are doing with the PlayStation 5? Or is it going to retail more than the PlayStation 5 Pro? Or heck, is it going to be both? Are we going to see enhanced PlayStation 5 games on the PS6? And is it going to retail for maybe $800 or $900? I don't know. That possibility is definitely there, but that is, once again, if Sony even survives long enough to get there, because at the rate they're going, they just might not. They are losing a lot of support from all of these price increases and all of these shady business decisions, and it's a very scary thing to think about one way or another. It's either the next generation may not come for Sony, or they're going to shoot themselves in the foot to the point of being greedy and losing all of their support. And if the PlayStation 6 does come, no one's gonna want it, because let's be real, we're not gonna want to spend $800 to $900 for basically an enhanced PlayStation 5. Technically, we're already getting an enhanced PlayStation 5 for just $200 beneath $900. So what does that say? Like, are we going to see Sony like learn their lesson and start thriving and giving us games again? Or is Sony going to continue down this path that they have gone down and just continue to be greedy and give us these stupid expensive systems like the PlayStation 5 Pro, for example, or these other games that we don't want? Like, I'm still convinced that they are going to try to revive Concord as a free-to-play game and litter it with microtransactions, despite the feedback that that game had. So, honestly, the future of Sony is very unclear, but from what little bit I am seeing, it's also very bleak, and I am not living for that. Like, I hate that Sony is in this state, but that is literally where they are right now. Honestly, if this teaches us anything, it's that these companies really are not our friends. I have known that for the longest time, but every single business practice that Sony has been engaging in recently has further confirmed that. It has done nothing but prove they are not your friends, they want your money, and they are willing to do anything to get it, including making shady business practices and giving you expensive stuff that you did not ask for, and even saying you want the stuff when in reality, you don't. The PlayStation 5 Pro is not needed. It really is not. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's cool that the PlayStation 5 Pro is capable of doing what it's doing. But instead of focusing on the PlayStation 5 Pro, like I said before, they should have focused more on software for the platform and maybe either release a PlayStation 5 Pro later, or heck, don't even give us a PlayStation 5 Pro. We don't need one. Do the PlayStation 6 later. Like, let the PlayStation 5 as it stands run its course, give us software for it, and instead of a PlayStation 5 Pro, give us the PlayStation 6. There you go. Like, honestly, the only revision that the PlayStation 2 got was a slim model, and that was just as a budget version of the PS2. So, honestly, they should have maybe done something like that with the PS5, like, make the PS5 Pro, or not PS5 Pro, the PS5 Slim cheaper than the PS5, but have that as your only revision. Like, there is no need for a PlayStation 5 Pro. I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. There is no need for that. Like, this could have easily been a PlayStation 6 a few years down the line. This could have easily been a PlayStation 6. But no. They chose to do a shady business tactic, release the Pro at $700, and try to entice you into buying it when you may have already spent $500 or $600 on a PlayStation 5, or maybe like $500 on the Slim model, and they're wanting to charge you another $700 for a system that can already play the same games as that system that you have. Or heck, you might not even be able to afford the standard PlayStation 5 or the PlayStation 5 Slim. If you can't even afford one of those, you for dang sure cannot afford the Pro, because it's $200 higher. Sony. Seriously. This is coming from a longtime fan here. What on earth is wrong with you? Like, seriously, what is wrong with you? These shady business practices are killing you as a company. They are killing your trust with your consumers. We are not happy with this. Like, we are genuinely not happy with any of the stuff you've been doing lately. And I am not afraid to say that. This crap right here needs to stop, and it needs to die. And for the record, I'm not saying every little thing with the PlayStation 5 is bad or anything, or every little thing that Sony has done recently is bad. I'm just simply pointing out all of the stuff that they have done recently. But they have done a lot of good recently as well. Look at Astrobot. People are praising this game. Sony needs to take the feedback from Astrobot and apply it to their future business decisions. This is the kind of stuff we want. Astrobot is a literal celebration of PlayStation as a whole. Not just PlayStation 5, but all PlayStation that has come before PlayStation 5. This right here is the kind of stuff we want. Not necessarily just the celebration stuff, but just give us good games. That's another thing. Astrobot, just from what I have been seeing, I haven't played this yet, but Astrobot is a dang good game. Like, that's all we really want. Just give us good games that are fun. We don't need these gigantic budget AAA games. We don't need these stupid expensive systems. We just want good fun games to play on our PlayStation 5s. We will be happy and satisfied with that. Whether they are like good multiplayer or good single player experiences, it doesn't matter. As long as it's fun and as long as it's good and as long as it's genuine, that's all we want. That's all we care about. But Sony is not focused on that. Honestly, technically, while Astrobot is a first-party IP, Sony wasn't necessarily the one behind making it. But it is still a PlayStation 5 exclusive, so I will go ahead and say this. Sony, give us more games like this. Acquire more studios that are willing to do this. Or better yet, don't bother acquiring more studios. Take the studios you already have that were not shut down after these stupid AAA game releases and have them make good games like Astrobot. Like, that right there, all on its own, will be a massive step forward for your company. That right there will be a huge step up. Like, seriously, that right there is the kind of stuff we want. And not just with Astrobot. What about your other IPs? Like, seriously, do you have other IPs, Sony? Remember Jak and Daxter? Does that not ring a bell? Like, I know for a fact that Naughty Dog works for y'all. Y'all could literally have Naughty Dog bring Jak and Daxter back. Like, you have the power to do it. So, why not bring this back? Here's another Sony franchise right here. It's owned by Insomniac, but here's another good one. Ratchet & Clank. I know we got Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, but is that the last Ratchet & Clank game we're going to get? Are you going to continue the Ratchet & Clank storyline with this? Or is Rift Apart just a bone you were wanting to throw us? Like, at this point, we don't really know. Like, are we going to get another Ratchet and Clank game even? Because this was one of the big three back on the early PS2 days. Like, you had Ratchet and Clank, you had Jak and Daxter, and you had Sly Cooper. And speaking of Sly Cooper, when is that coming back? Like, you have not given us a Sly Cooper game since Thieves in Time on the PlayStation 3 and Vita. The PlayStation 4 did not get a Sly Cooper game. And honestly, neither did Ratchet and Clank on the PS4. Ratchet and Clank on PS4 was just a remake of the first game, so I'm not gonna count that. But Sly Cooper has been MIA since PlayStation 3 and Vita days. When is this coming back? I know Jak and Daxter has been MIA longer, but still, like, you have all of these IPs at your disposal. You just don't want to bring them back. You want to give us other things that we are not interested in. And just for the record, I am aware that the PS2 Sly Cooper game did get re-released on PS5. But I'm not going to count this because this is not a brand new Sly Cooper game. This is just the PlayStation 2 game re-released for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. So, aside from this right here, just because I know some people are probably going to say something about this, but aside from this, Sly Cooper has been MIA since PlayStation 3 and Vita days. But I'm not going to count this since it isn't a new game. So, I just wanted to go ahead and throw that out there before moving on. And honestly, I can keep going on with this. I really, really could. But the overall point of this video was for me to kind of just get my frustration with Sony out there, but also to kind of just make a point. PlayStation is not in a good spot right now. They are in a very, very bad spot. As far as I'm concerned, the Sony that we once loved is gone. They are straight up gone. Now, am I saying there's not going to be any good PlayStation 5 games? No, I'm not saying that. But I guarantee you a lot of the good PlayStation 5 games that we will get are either third party or they will be a one-off good first party from Sony. Unless they are willing to actually budge and listen to the fans and start giving us the games we want. This is something that they have done for years since the PlayStation 1, but after the PlayStation 4 days, they just kind of stopped caring. Honestly, calling out Sony was not really the intent of the video at all, like in any way, shape, or form. But I think the situation with Sony just frustrates me to the point to where I kind of just got led into it by my own emotion. I'm gonna be honest. I more so wanted to just express my concern, but then it kind of turned into me just ranting and calling Sony out. So, yeah, that was not the intent, but I honestly feel like these companies need to hear this. If we don't like something that they are doing, we need to call them out on it, and we need to let them know we are not pleased with their decisions. But that is honestly all I have to say for this video. I want to know what your thoughts are on this subject in the comment section down below. Are you okay with where Sony is at? Are you pleased with their business decisions? Are you not pleased with their business decisions? Let me know all of your thoughts on this whole scenario in the comment section down below. Do you agree with my points? Do you disagree with my points? I honestly welcome all forms of opinions, regardless of what they are. You can criticize any opinion I have, criticize my structure of my videos or whatever. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one. Take care.